Let's talk about what happens when you rely on a man or romantic relationships to be the healer of all of your traumas. And I'm not saying anyone should go into relationships already fully healed, because that's impossible. And more often than not, I do think that many of us find, the fullness of our healing in a romantic relationship. It brings out the worst and kind of also the best in us, right? And this is in reflection of what has been happening in episode 10 of Married at First Sight, where we see Makoto, the character that has been ruffling a lot of feathers lately, and unfortunately has been giving us women a very bad rep in the show, in terms of just the very many outbursts that she's been having on the show. This kind of dominant, I don't want to use this word, but masculine appearing kind of persona that's very combative, very rude and crass. Ever since, I should point out, ever since she was insulted by one of the men in the show to say, quoting this a Snoop Dogg song, apparently, that you can't turn a hoe into a wife, right? So ever since then, I think she has just had this armor on that's trying to protect herself from the insults, protect herself from the negative view that the rest of the cast seems to have of her. And I think it's just because of her personality in general, but then more so because it has now been attributed to her inability to show up as a wife, right? Not being this kind of wifey material. And it actually comes up in episode 10, when all of the couples are sitting with the experts, that there might have been a conversation between the women that Makoto is not wifey material, but that conversation also came from Bongani, one of the grooms, conversation with his wife, who is Portia, I think is the name. So Bongani seems to have said that, and then Portia brings it into the conversation with the other ladies, and then it becomes a thing, right? Nelisa, who's, seems to be the one beefing the most with Makoto, is like, she's uneasy with Makoto. She does say very openly that she finds Makoto to be a little bit too much. We see them also when they play pedal, that there's quite a bit of tension between them. Makoto insulting Nelisa about her age, which is obviously her acting out and really being bitter or unhappy about the fact that Nelisa seems to be getting what she wants from this experience, and she is stuck with this man, Glego, who she doesn't really respect and who doesn't like her, right? Because that's just what I'm picking up from this thing. Glego is not really into Makoto like that, but also Makoto doesn't respect Glego like that. And the reason that Makoto doesn't respect Glego like that also comes up in episode 10. We see them going to the gym together. They're busy, working out and whatnot. And she starts talking about how hurt people, right? And the fact that she realizes that she's being unnecessary in her little outbursts, and that she doesn't know how to handle herself in this relationship or marriage with Glego. Glego is like there for her in one way or another, tries to say some sweet little nothings to her, and she starts breaking down, crying, talking about the fact that she's not used to soft love. And I found that so funny. I found it very interesting how we moved from Kululego being disingenuous and being this kind of double personality on and off the camera to suddenly Glego being a soft lover. I found it so interesting, but I guess it came from the fact that she realized that the other ladies are not necessarily in the same mindset as she is in terms of them not getting, especially because Portia decided to change her mind about Bongani. Portia is suddenly interested and into Bongani. Portia wants to try this thing out. She called Bongani a king in episode 9 and all of those things. I don't know how long that's gonna last, but it seems like Makoto is realizing that actually no one is going to be backing her up, right, in her attacks against the other relationships and against the men, but mostly because she also threw these women under the bus, talking about Portia having come to her to ask her to hook her up with one of her friends, talking about how earlier in the season she pointed out that Nelisa's husband, Utemba, was on vacation or something. I think it was her, but there was a conversation like that. I'm not sure if it was actually her, but there was that conversation. So I think she felt as though generally the women would be heading towards the direction of not being happy in their marriages and attacking the men. And so she found that to be more fuel, right, that she could use to actually not only burn her own marriage, but also, the other women would be encouraged to also speak out against their husbands and express their dissatisfaction with the whole thing. But that didn't happen. So suddenly, Glego is a soft lover. But beneath all of that, we also see that there's a lot of rawness and a lot of pain that this woman is carrying that she comes into the experiment with. And she talks about, there was an episode earlier where she and Glego go to break things that, those places where you can go in and break things apart and just express your anger and rage and whatever. So they do that, and Makoto proceeds to cry hysterically. Glego is there comforting her, and it comes up that her relationship with her father and brother is not good, right? Then they go and meet the two families meet up, and Makoto and her father are crying, and I think the loss of her mother is still a very touchy subject. And I'm not sure how the loss of her mother led to this further breakdown in their relationship, because it sounds like they haven't been speaking to one another in a long time, and it's not clear just what the relationship was between Makoto and her dad before the passing of her mom. So there's a lot of rawness there, right? There's a lot of wounds that are there. There's a lot that this woman is carrying into this show. And I find it so self-sabotaging and self-deprecating to go into an experience like this without having healed that aspect of yourself and having worked on that aspect of yourself. And I think it speaks so much to a general mentality that a lot of women find themselves in especially in the context of South Africa, where we've got such scary rates of gender-based violence. There's this sense that this becomes a blind spot, and a blind spot with very great consequences, because then you go into a relationship, a serious relationship, or you go into a marriage with all these wounds, with a warped sense of how a man and woman should relate to one another, seeking for validation, seeking for approval, seeking for someone to kind of fill that gap and make you feel good about yourself, or someone, in fact, to be able to tame you and control you, right? Because you've been walking in so much protectiveness, right? You've been walking with so much need to defend yourself and protect yourself because of the hurt, right? That you think that somehow a man should be able to not only remove that armor from you, but then restore, right, your softness, whatever that means, and your femininity, right? The man is the one who's supposed to somehow tame you. That is a very dangerous position to put yourself in. And in this case, Makoto finds Glego, who I think, this is the best case scenario because Glego uses the Bible scripture, which I think he's still faking, honestly. He's still using the scripture because to show that this man doesn't like this woman, he asks her, what is it about me that makes you still want to date me, right? Still want to be with me? Glego goes on to talk about how, yay, God in the Bible said there was a beautiful flower. Yeah. And Makoto falls for that. I don't understand. She's asking him what he thinks about her, right? And what it is about her. Glego is struggling to find any positive thing to say about Makoto, and he runs to the Bible and scripture and quotes, all of these things, and Makoto breaks down and cries and is like, oh, it's so soft, it's so soft. I said last time that the two of them are in some kind of a movie, and I guess this is also part of the act, but again, Makoto's outbursts and Makoto's crying in this episode, I think, does reveal those deeper elements that I'm talking about today. And this is problematic because it puts you in a vulnerable position more than ever, because now when a man mistreats you, when a man starts abusing you, it's very difficult to see the abuse because you're still thinking that he's a man, he's handling me, he's trying to tame me because I'm so strong and powerful. These young boys can't really handle me, so I need a man who's strong, who shows up, who's got that sort of machismo in him, who's got this sort of commanding authority over me and commanding authority over my body, right? Because Glego is visibly smaller than Makoto, and I think that's where also we find ourselves in a predicament, because you do want that, masculine looking man, and you do want him to show up as being able to protect you, right? And again, in today's world, in the modern era, there's no need for that, but we do, I think, gravitate towards that need for a man to be, physically imposing on us. And it's a very strange thing, because then you're stuck with this man in the house, and his imposing physique could be the reason why you find yourself in trouble later on in terms of physical violence. And again, it takes a sense of being healed and being aligned and knowing yourself and not needing a man, and that's very important, to be able to sit and discern, right? And be able to clock some of those signs of a possible, violent man, or a possible man who might one day push you in that position. A lot of women who show up in the world like Makoto struggle to see that. They struggle to see that actually the work begins with you. The work begins with your healing and your being able to tame yourself, and you're being able to shed, right, all of this hurt and trauma that you've gone through. Fill your own cup and be that which you expect, right, from the man that's about to come into your life. Sit with yourself and see the value in yourself beyond, right, this sort of need to defend all the time. And I was listening to Ask a Man, I think last week somewhere. And again, it's one of the shows that I really enjoy listening to. And it reveals a lot about what's going on in our society in terms of relationships and marriages. You should give it a try sometime. But there was a woman who called, and when Somizi was giving advice, there was a point where he mentions that there are some women in South Africa, and I don't want this to. I'm even hesitant to mention this, because I think these are some of the conversations that justify or give men, prevents them from taking accountability for their own actions in terms of violence against women. But Somizi says that there are women in South Africa who think that physical abuse is a sign that a man loves you. There are women who think that this is okay. And when Makoto says she's not used to the soft love, that's the thing that came to my mind to say, what do you mean you're not used to soft love? So that means you're used to hard love, right? You're used to what? Violent love? You're used to a man that not only matches the level of combativeness that you have, but surpasses it and is able to impose himself on you and keep you in the straight and narrow, right? Is that what you mean? I find that to be very troubling, and that just puts her in such a vulnerable position. I think if she's going to continue operating in this way, I think Glego is not the guy for her. Let's just get that straight. But moving forward, in order for her to see something different to be good for her, she's going to need to work on herself a little, so much more, actually, not a little, so much more, so that she's in a position to appreciate, right, this kind of soft love that she thinks exists, that she's not used to. And unfortunately, in the South African context, many of us have struggled with our relationships with our fathers, myself included, and there's a lot of work that I've had to do in my 20s to undo that. Therapy, meditation, reparenting, staying single, staying with myself and learning and appreciating myself, developing that self-love kind of thing, but also leaning into my relationships with the women in my life, the very strong women in my life who encourage that, right? Who encourage you to see yourself as a whole being without a man. And I'm going to do a video about why feminism is important in dating and relationships, because if it weren't for that sense of community with other women and that sense of evidence of other women moving beyond, right, their need for a relationship or to stay in a marriage despite the fact that the marriage is abusive, moving beyond that and actually building themselves back up and actually standing up for themselves and doing great and living their best lives. I think that is so important, right? So the more I did that, is the more I kind of shared, right, myself of that trauma and just that contentious relationship I have with my father, which again is never going to be perfect, and that healing is never going to be perfect. But I think I've gotten to a point where I'm able to say, with or without a man, I'll be okay, right? And therefore it helps me not put myself in a situation where I'm going to say, I don't like this man, I don't see the value of this man, just because he appears to be softer, right? And appears to be attentive and appears to be actually invested in my well-being. So this is where we get it twisted. Yeah, I've said what I wanted to say. The other women seem to be trying to make it work for themselves. Balisa and Tepo's drama is dissipating. Tepo apologizes. Oh, and I don't know if I believe Tepo's apologies, because he says I apologize for what I did instead of I'm sorry, please forgive me, right? I don't know if I believe his apologies, but nonetheless, Balisa seems to be, she cries during the apology, tells him how much he embarrassed her, and it seems like she says that she's tired of all the fighting, and then she forgives him, right? So we'll see. They meet with the friend Nkateko, who was in another reality show with the relationships with the that woman. And I really loved Nkateko in that show, but it was interesting that Nkateko and Palisa are friends. Nonetheless, they are together for dinner with Tepo, and Palisa says that she's checked out of this marriage. She's just, I guess still in it for the fact that she has to still be in the experience, but she's very much, she's saying that Tepo is not the man for him, for her, and she's checked out of the marriage, which is good for her. I think it's very good for her. I think, yo, yeah, no, Tepo is not the one for her, in fact. But we see the final scene of the episode that something happens between them in the car, and Tepo calls production to come in and remove Palisa from his car because it looks like she was touching him, looking for the mic or something. So I guess there might be some other stuff that gets revealed about Palisa in the next episode that we don't know about. But I doubt that any of it will redeem Tepo still, because Tepo has his own issues that, are way too apparent that we can say that Palisa had anything to do with. Anyways, Portia seems to think that she and Bongani are in a good place and that Makoto should stop imposing herself and meddling and talking about their other people's marriages, and that she should focus on her marriage. But I don't think that whatever she's trying to do with Bongani is genuine. Apparently Bongani tells her that he loves her, and she says that, if that's what he was feeling, that's what he was feeling. She's trying to give it a shot. I think it has more to do with maybe the money aspect, which she said previously doesn't, do anything to her. It doesn't mean anything that Bongani has money. She just doesn't like Bongani. But suddenly she wants to make it work with Bongani. So it's very unclear what that's about. And it's also another caution to say a lot of women go into these relationships and stay in these relationships because of the money aspect, right? The fact that again, I'm going to make a video on why feminism matters in dating and relationships, because it seems like Portia and who's the other lady, Palisa, are staying in these marriages because these men seem to have the financial means, right? And again, we get into the trap, the illusion that providing only means providing in a monetary sense. And that then distracts us, right, from the other, principles or character traits that we should look for in these men that give us a sense that he is a provider. So both of them are staying, it seems, in these marriages because of the money. I don't know how long that's going to last for Portia, but I guess it's starting to backfire for Palesa, because regardless of the fact that, Tepo seems to be well off, and and the fact that he took away these financial things from her, it seems that now she's realizing that she's not supposed to be in this marriage and that Tepo is not the man for her. So that's what's happening. There's nothing to say about Nelisa. She seems to be happy. She seems to be in bliss in her. Yeah, she seems to also have quailed the drama that was happening between Themba and the baby mama. I don't know how far she thinks it's gonna go, because the fact that Themba did that, meaning embarrass this woman in live television, says a lot about the man. But I hope for her sake that it doesn't it's not a reflection of how he might turn out to be in the future. And I hope that her delusion and her happiness and lover girl energy is enough to keep this man at bay. So this is all I'm going to say about episode 10. And I think the main thing that I wanted to reflect on is Makoto and just how important it is for women to heal themselves and be secure in themselves before they go into these serious relationships or marriages. And I'm saying again, it doesn't have to be complete healing, but it does have to be enough for one to be able to show up as an authentic version of themselves, sit comfortably knowing who they are, and be able to discern and be able to appreciate, right, those softer elements that some men will bring into the relationship. But having said that, Glego is not really a soft lover. Glego is just a performative representation of what a Christian man would do in a marriage. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Until next time.